college football is really heating up for everybody right now, and it is as good as it has been in a very long time. And I've always thought that college football has produced and performed, but there's just so much chaos, and I'm expecting a lot of chaos this week. And if you want to see all my opinions, it's going to be well documented over on TikTok. Just look me up at Bash the CFB Show. But if you're new around here, my name is Colin Bashnigal, and I am your host here at Bash's College Football Show, and we are going to be breaking down a handful of games here, going into a deep dive. That's what all these videos that you're going to see is, and we're also going to get to the Walk That Line segment, where we had a very rough week one, but we've kind of been doing well lately, so make sure you tune into that. We're going to be dropping that on Friday afternoon. And speaking of that segment, I do have a play for you at the end of the video that's going to count for Walk That Line. So make sure you stay tuned for that. It's with one of the weekday games. I am super excited for this week in college football. Today we are going to be talking about the big game between Oregon and Penn State. We might drop a second video in the morning that I'm planning on recording tonight. So make sure you guys keep your eye out on that, because we're going to have those previews locked and loaded, man. But this game is huge. It's the first real test for both of these teams. Oregon going on the road to Penn State. It's a whiteout night game on NBC. This is going to be incredible. And, you know, when it comes to this game, I'm sure Penn State fans, you're going to be asking a lot of questions about what this team is capable of doing, what this team can do. Penn State, coming into this game as 3.5-point favorites, has the question of, is Drew Aller and James Franklin the problem? Or did they address the problem? Was the problem the receiving corps? Was the problem the weapons? That's what we're going to be very curious about here. And I really think that this is a very good opportunity for Drew Aller to prove himself a little bit, show a legacy in a big game. You can see the rankings down below. I know the AP poll, as garbage as it is, and I have my reasons for that, and I've very much well documented why we go by these rankings until the College Football Playoff comes out with their rankings. The College Football Playoff Committee comes out with their rankings. This, to me, is the top 5 matchup. So if James Franklin is able to win this game, and people at the end of the year are going to be saying, oh, he's lost this many top 5 matchups in a row, I don't care, because this is a top 5 matchup. If he wins this game, that is going to be huge for Penn State as far as moving forward. Now, when I look and I deep dive into this offense, and we've seen them against bad competition, the best opponent they've played by far was FIU. I think there's really no debate there. I think FIU is definitely better than Nevada and Villanova. FIU is not that bad of a team. And they gave Penn State the best game out of those opponents. That offense did not look good in their best test. Now, I mean, they put up 34 points. They were able to move the football. I know all of this. Trevor Pena has had good moments. I know all of these things. But the problem is when I watch them, this O-line is not what it's hyped up to be. It's just not. And I really think when you are talking about this Penn State team being super dominant, it starts with those guys up front. I had the same problem with Clemson. The experience of those players on the offensive line is not going to be an automatic, they're going to be a great offensive line. And we see it with Clemson right now. And I think to a certain degree, this Penn State O-line is not bad. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that. Are they at that level to where they can dominate and take over a game? I don't think so. I think this pass rush that Oregon has, they're going to be able to get a little bit going in this game. And you got to live with that a little bit. But there are going to be opportunities here with a new raw secondary for Penn State to really take advantage through the air, take advantage with the passing game. They're going to have to show that the additions of Trevor Pena and Devontae Ross and Kyron Hudson meant a lot for this program. They're going to have to show that some of these other players, Liam Clifford, or if it were to be the true freshman, I guess Kobe Howard, who got a lot of hype in the spring, Tyseer Denmark, who's been a player that's been hyped up to me for a little while. We're going to have to see these guys step up in a big way in a big game. I am not super concerned with the tight end position. I think they have two really good ones, Khalil Dinkins and Luke Reynolds. I don't really think they're missing too much from the departure of Tyler Warren from a production standpoint, unless they kind of have to force him, feed him the ball because these receivers aren't performing in these big games. But they're putting more of an emphasis on spreading out the wealth and rotating the running backs and trying to keep a good balance on offense, and of course doing the tricky things that Andy Koldenecki ends up bringing to the table. Now, this is all going to come down to, is this offense going to be prepared? Is Drew Aller going to be ready for the big moment? Because to this point, and I think Penn State fans, you will agree with me, Drew Aller has not been up for the big moment. He did play pretty well in the Big Ten championship against Oregon, and maybe that was the exception to the rule. But generally speaking, you look at two outings against Ohio State, an outing against Michigan, his first year starting, last year against Notre Dame. I mean, even when you watch the Boise State game, you weren't necessarily super impressed with Drew Aller, right? So he's got to show that he is what he's hyped up to be. He is what he's capable of being, and he's got to show that, look, he's not a guy who's just going to beat up on the bad teams. He can win the big one, and we have not seen that from him. Now, the good thing about Penn State is they got a really good defense to kind of bail out the offense a little bit, and it gives them a shot in every single game that they've been in. I mean, it gave them a shot against Michigan, where the pass rush with Chop Robinson a couple years ago was so dynamic that Michigan couldn't throw the ball, and they decided to run the ball, and they were able to have success doing that, but they had to kind of change things up because Penn State was being disruptive. I was at the Penn State-Ohio State game 2 years ago as well. That defense was disruptive. I think the only player who did anything was Marvin Harrison Jr. Last year, Ohio State, you started off with a pick six, right? On defense. You end up not scoring an offensive touchdown, but the defense kept you in that game. When is the offense going to be able to make a big stand? Because, you know, it got to a situation against Oregon last year where the defense struggled to stop Oregon. And if that happens again, and it turns out that it wasn't necessarily a roster-dependent thing, but Will Stein kind of has the number, and I get it's Jim Knowles. It's a different defense. I get that too. But let's say Oregon has the number, which, by the way, Oregon did have the number in one of those games against Jim Knowles. Let's say Oregon's offense has Penn State's number, and they're able to move the ball. They have the talent, and they spread the wealth. Can that offense really elevate and rise to the occasion? Because though they played well against Oregon last year, they didn't do quite enough. This Oregon offense is really loaded with a lot of talent, and the biggest question mark was because of the injury to Evan Stewart. How would they look at wide receiver? Well, DeCorian Moore has looked really good. And then you also got other guys like Gary Bryant Jr. and Malik Benson, who've been in college football a little while, and they make some good plays. And then I've been also really impressed with the redshirt freshman, and I'm super excited to say this too, because this is a kid that I was very high on coming out of high school. I know Ohio State wanted him really bad. Jeremiah McClellan, he's one to watch for too. He's a really good wide receiver. And they also have one of the freakiest tight ends that I have seen in college football in the last 10 years in Kenyon Sadiq. He's just a heck of an athlete. They go really deep at running back. They have a couple of guys like Noah Whittington, Mekhi Hughes coming in from Tulane, and they've used Jaden Lamar a whole lot. Dante Moore has a lot of tools. Isaiah World at tackle, by the way, that addition, it made a question mark turn quickly into a strength of this team. That offensive line is really good, and adding those two tackles to come in through the transfer portal and then Pregnon at guard, I think that is huge for this offensive line because they seem to be gelling pretty well, granted against bad competition. And, you know, when you watch Oregon, though, they pass the eye test, and I'm worried Penn State doesn't. This defense definitely has a lot of talent, though. I mean, you're talking about Zane Durant, a very disruptive force, especially in the run game. And, you know, Oregon's going to want to run the football. They're going to want to take pressure off DeCorian Moore Dante Moore on the road. Denai Dennis Sutton is a very versatile player in that respect. He can be really good in the run game, and he can also be a dynamic pass rusher. I think they are going to find points this year where they're like, yeah, we kind of miss Abdul Carter. I mean, there's a reason why when you look up and down the roster, like nobody's wearing number 11. I wonder why. Because they don't have Abdul Carter. Experienced linebackers, I like that. You know, Amari Campbell has looked pretty good. Dominic DeLuca is obviously a player you can plug in there too. That is a really good middle linebacker. And then Tony Rojas had a lot of good moments last year, had a lot of bad too. So I'll be very interested to see what this front seven can do as far as stifling the run game, because you know Oregon's going to want to come in and run the football. And if you are able to put the ball into Dante Moore's hands, I am excited to see that matchup between those receivers and the secondary, because I think this secondary is really good. AJ Harris has proven to be a lockdown corner that's really good. I actually think that he's a better, at least collegiate corner, than Joey Porter Jr. was. I really think that he is a stud. He is a guy who can lock down half the field, and I'm expecting for him to have a big day. Zakee Wheatley is also one of my favorite safeties in the country. I think this is a heavyweight matchup. Like, I really do. For as much as I talked about Penn State's offense and the question marks there, these are first world problems. And I was talking to somebody earlier today, and I kind of echoed the sentiment that I've heard from Josh Pate before, because I firmly agree with this. Somebody asked me earlier today, let's say Penn State loses to Oregon and Ohio State, and then they get bounced in the playoff in their first top 5 matchup in the playoff, whoever that may be. Do they fire Franklin? Was the question. I said, absolutely not. Because I tell you what, Penn State is not that far removed from a situation where James Franklin, right before James Franklin got there in James Franklin's first year, they weren't relevant. They weren't ranked. They weren't in the conversation year to year. Now they are. And I think that it says a lot about a coach, and James Franklin shows that he is a really good coach. The fact that his team is always in these positions, in these big time matchups. This is a team who earns their way to these opportunities. And unfortunately for Penn State fans, a lot of pain comes from not making the most of those opportunities. But them not having the history of making the most of these opportunities is why I got to pick Oregon. And I hope for all my Penn State fans out there, I hope you can understand that. And I hope you can respect that. And I am willing to admit that I was wrong. And Penn State could potentially get over a huge hurdle with this win. But I am picking Oregon. I trust that Dan Lanning is going to have these troops fired up. And I think that they're going to have a good plan for the loud noise that Penn State is going to produce and Penn State's going to have. This is going to be fun to see. I am very excited to watch this football game on Saturday night. I am going with Oregon, though. 24-21, eking out a victory on the road. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you like this video if you've made it this far. Real quick, before we go, I promise you will walk that line play. Tomorrow night, Army plus 4.5 is a lock. Walk that line, lock. I didn't want to rush into making the video like I did last week because I ended up filming it during the Rice game. So I'm not going to include it in the graphic, but I'm going to include it in the record. And I'm going to be doing that video on Friday. Until Friday, you're going to be seeing a lot more game previews as we try to pump them out a little earlier. I love Army tomorrow. Make sure that if you want to get it now, because I think that they're going to win on the money line. I think that they are the right underdog to take. You know, a short week for East Carolina, a very similar style of offense maybe to Kansas State, except I think they don't run the ball as heavy. And I really think that this Army team has a real chance to catch East Carolina off of a physical game in a Power 4 at a good spot on a Thursday night. Is East Carolina probably the better team? Yeah. I don't care that they lost to Tarleton. Tarleton is a top 10 FCS school. This is still a pretty solid Army team, and you give them a short week, think they're going to be able to make the most of it. So thank you guys for tuning in. I'll see you guys in the next video.